This is Trendsetter Podcast, where we talk about trends and how to use them to grow your business. My name is Manny Tran.
And I'm Adam Harton.
We're Spark Partners. We're here every week to discuss all things trends, all things business. We dive in and out of other topics as it pertains to growing your business. And one of the big ones we've been talking about over the past year, and really what might become the singular issue with the upcoming election, is that, of course, of immigration. And, being the son of immigrants, I have a very different perspective. Being, growing up on a border town, spending lots of time on a border town, having relatives in Mexico. I mean, I'm kind of very much in the mix, and I have a very strong opinion about things. And so I know that there's some recent data, Adam, that you and I have uncovered that is interesting to the conversation. And, I think last year we talked a lot about demographics. Immigration is a form of demographics. So let's start there.
Sure. Well, yes, immigration directly is related to demographic policies. And the demographic policy we keep talking about, the demographic fact is the aging of the American economy. The baby boomers are working out of the workforce. Almost all of them are at retirement age now. Many of them have left the workforce. Many of them would like to leave the workforce if they could. But what we don't have are enough workers to replace them. So we've had a shortage of workers. Employers across the country, especially small and mid-sized companies, are really struggling to hire, struggling to keep people in the jobs. They need workers desperately. And so today, this week, there's a lot of press out there about a nursing student in Georgia who is found dead. Her name was Lance. I'm trying to look at it right here. Her name was Laken Riley. And it's certainly an unfortunate and horrible situation that this young person, age 22, has been found deceased. At this time, she's been accused of a man who has been an immigrant has been accused of the murder. Of course, this happened this week. We haven't had a trial, or any of that kind of stuff. Interestingly, this person, they say, is an immigrant, and by the way, not Mexican, but rather Venezuelan by background. So there's all this media press, all this hype around how horrible this is, and various politicians are screaming and yelling, "Oh, this was an avoidable murder if we would shut down the border." And, it's kind of like saying nobody would ever drown if we emptied all the swimming pools in the country. You're right. Every year there's a few small children that drown in swimming pools, and we could eliminate that problem and save those children if we emptied all the swimming pools of water and filled them with dirt. Not one child then would die by drowning in a swimming pool. But is that really the right policy? Right?
No, clearly not.
Stop all swimming pools because one person accidentally dies. So I think we're trying to have to step back from that press. Let's start talking about some other press that is coming. Right. And part of that is related to the economy. And people have been, when we ended the pandemic, the economy started to surge, and we ended up with some inflation. And you and I have done several podcasts about the cause of that, which we said from the beginning was a supply shortage, that people had been sitting in their homes, they had cash, they were ready to spend money, but it was, took 2 or 3 months to shut a bunch of manufacturing plants down, strand a lot of inventory at sea, create this stopped economy. You don't just flip a switch and all of a sudden the factories are reopened. All of a sudden the ships are unloading their inventory. It obviously doesn't work that way. But for some reason, apparently a lot of politicians and economists forgot the real world's different than the book. And so what we had this inability we had to get the factories going, had to get products being made, had to get things back in the supply chain, had to get it back into the stores. So we had this inflation that occurred because of it. Well, what did they say? Jack up the interest rates. So we did that. Federal Reserve comes in, jacks up the interest rates. That I said, look, that's not trying to solve the problem, right? It's the wrong medicine. It's like giving somebody heart medicine when you discover they've got a broken leg. It's not the right way to go about it. But okay, that we couldn't do anything about it. I certainly don't have control over it, even though I thought it was really, really bad policy. But then the vast majority of economists said, we're going to have a horrible recession. The economy is going to fall off a cliff. There's going to be super high unemployment. It'll be double-digit unemployment. To choke off this inflation, we will have to crush the economy and unemployment will skyrocket. And that did not happen.
Right.
In fact, we saw these shortages of workers at a time whenever, instead of companies cutting back, they were saying, I got to make more stuff. I got to make more stuff. I'm selling everything that I can make. Prices are going up because demand exceeds supply. And so we saw them really, really hungry for getting workers. So we've seen this play out now since the pandemic started. And this week now we've gotten a lot of data that covers the period from 21 through 2023, starting 2024 now. We've got real data to see what happened in the economy. So the Congressional Budget Office issued a report, and there's a lot of new data they brought out from the Department of Labor and from many of the regional Federal Reserve offices, San Francisco in particular being called upon. And then all of this has been brought together in a wonderful article by the Washington Post, which was brought to my attention by Buckley Brinkman. And anybody here that's listening can go do a search on the Washington Post and can find the article. But the reality is the economy has greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. And what we've been able to say is that we had this very unique situation where we had great data related to the economy as the pandemic shut down and came out. We don't normally get this kind of clear data. We don't usually get the opportunity to say if economy shut down, we're having to kind of ameliorate between a lot of different factors. But this time we said, okay, what happened? Why did the economy not go into another recession? And they were able to determine that it was largely because so many people went to work and we had so many immigrants. The Congressional Budget Office said, had we not had so many immigrants, the economy would have gone into a recession. We would not have been able to make the stuff that we needed. Then it was the fact that we had these immigrants that the economy is actually doing so incredibly well. So, I mean, here's some interesting stuff to recognize. Between 2007 and 2024, over the last years, the number of undocumented immigrants has actually declined by 14%. So while at the same time, the media is screaming and yelling of open borders, people pouring across the border, how horrible the situation is with these immigrants coming in, the reality is we have 14% fewer undocumented workers today than we had in 2007. At the same time, the number of documented legal immigrants, the ones who have work papers, has gone up 29%. So while the press is all upset about all the people that have come across and how we're going to process these people to get them to work or send them out of the country or put them into an asylum program, well, there's a lot of screaming about that. And you've got people in Texas, politicians in Texas, busing people out of Texas to Denver, Colorado, Chicago, Illinois, New York City. They're just saying, oh, it's a horrible problem. Everything's strained. Everything's in its limit. The reality is that, in fact, the legal immigrants number has grown while the undocumented number has gone down.
Yeah.
It is worthwhile sometimes to try to actually take a look at the facts, right?
Yeah, you would think so.
So what's happening is we call them foreign-born workers rather than migrants in the Labor Department. Foreign-born workers have closed the boomer gap. So when all the boomers said, hey, recession came, it's time for me to walk away. I want to quit being a school teacher. I want to quit working for the water department, whatever jobs they had. So we're going to stop working. That left this big gap. To fill the gap, employers have reached out. And now what we've been able to do is actually accumulate the data to show that 50% of the labor market growth from the time the pandemic started in 21, 50% of growth in the labor market has been from immigrants, non-foreign born citizens. So in other words, we're sitting here today struggling to keep the Walgreens shelves full, to try to make sure that we have plenty of product on the shelves. We still aren't out of the woods yet. Much better than it was, but still not out of the woods. In this situation, if we hadn't had so many foreign-born workers brought into the labor pool, we'd basically be sitting here without any toilet paper. You'd be struggling for all kinds of product, cars, boats, 2x4s. You'd be struggling for furniture. The number of things you'd be struggling for would be different.
And I think that sort of information, that data is not always spoken about, at the political stage. Politics is like show business, right? You want something that's sensational. You want something to grab onto as your headline. And it is a matter of really questioning and asking these questions. I mean, it's clear that, we're in a situation now, post-pandemic, where there's still a lot of confusion as to the state of the economy. But like you just said, the actual data shows that we are where we are right now because of these, what do they call them again? Foreign-born workers.
So one of the big things I hear people scream about on television is this notion of foreign-born workers, immigrants stealing jobs. They're out there taking a job away from some sort of a native-born American worker. Well, the fact is that if that was true, what would happen is you would have much higher unemployment among the native-born workforce. As we know, unemployment is record lows. Pretty much, what the economists will tell you, the unemployment rate is so low that anybody who wants a job can get a job. Yeah. And that means that we haven't lost jobs to native-born Americans. And that can also be often interpreted in some circles as white Americans.
Right.
We've also made it possible that we've expanded the workforce and increased the number of non-white people that are native-born in the workforce at the same time. This has meant that despite all the screaming and yelling about how we're going to have this great recession, wages have gone up 4% per year. Now, I'll agree there was an inflation. We haven't fully recovered it, but we almost have. Wages have almost gone up on a statistical basis to cover the amount of the inflation we had. We've caught back up again. We've caught back up even though we've added all of these immigrants to the workforce, which means that they haven't taken jobs from somebody else. They filled necessary jobs.
Yeah.
The manufacturers, service, restaurants, hotels, people needed workers. They reached out for workers, and they've been getting them, and they wouldn't have been able to get them had it not been for the migrants, the immigrants.
Yeah, and I think the mindset that people forget about the migrant workers and such is that they're here because they want to work. They're here whether or not they want to assimilate to the quote unquote American culture and all that. That's a different conversation. We're business people here. We're talking about getting the job done. I've got friends that own construction companies, roofing companies, and so forth. And the number one issue is finding capable workers. And they are trying their hardest to fill these jobs. They have open recs, continuous open recs, and they can't fill them. And the ones that are able to fill them are the ones that are using labor pools that are from foreign-born workers. It's clear that if we want to grow their economy, we've got to continue that process.
Well, and we haven't even talked about people that might be employing an undocumented worker. You're not supposed to do that, but we know what happens, right? In fact, in this Washington Post article, they interviewed a fellow that had a carpeting manufacturing facility in Georgia, and he pays about $11.65 an hour. So a lot of places you couldn't live on $11.65 an hour. That's what he pays. He says every day there's a line of people outside his door that want to work, and he couldn't keep his factory open if it weren't for that line of people. And when they asked him if he makes sure that all of them are legal, he says, I don't question anybody's papers, which is a sideways way of saying, hey, I don't look too close. If they got papers that say they can work, then I put them to work and I pay them. Whereas perhaps those papers were copies of somebody else's papers, it might have been not up to snuff. But still, what we have are a lot of employers, as you said, hey, I'm not going to get that house built. I'm not going to be able to get that carpet made. I'm not going to be able to get those parts out the door if I don't have somebody on the job. And to get enough people on the job, we have to have immigration. We need those workers. If you think about like the acute situation of nursing, for example, we're losing nurses. We've lost nurses every year since the pandemic started. It's a tough job. I tell you, I couldn't do that job. I couldn't go into a situation where I'm helping sick people day after day after day, being compassionate, being helpful, doing a lot of really physical work, picking people up, moving them around, helping them get things done, dealing with people that have bad attitudes because they're sick, dealing with the problems that come with sickness. Everywhere from they're dealing with just patients in a room to nurses that are helping physicians in surgery. This is a tough job.
Very much so.
We're losing people in that job because they aren't paid enough and they work double shifts, and there's a whole lot of problems with how the medical system is set up. And we're sitting here like, okay, how are we going to replace those nurses? One of the people they interviewed in the Washington Post article was a surgical nurse from Venezuela who had walked all the way to the United States, gotten in, asylum seeker, and got a work permit. But he right now working in a factory making about $16, $17 an hour. We need a program to try to move that person into healthcare, right? And as the baby boomers age, I'm sorry, baby boomers, but we need more of these people. We need service people that are going to help us in the hospital, help us in the clinic, help us in our homes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too patriotic and wave the flag and put an eagle on my shoulder and all that, but I mean, this great country was founded by immigrants, right? At every stage of our development, every stage, there's been immigration. And everything from the founding fathers who were immigrants of a sort, right? At least culturally. And then you think about, during the Depression days, and there's always these ostracized communities. There's the Irish, and then there's the Italian, and there's these things. And here we are again at the same crossroads, and now we have the opportunity, if the politicians were to get out of the way and really allow this to grow, we could do this legally. We could, there would be taxed, right? And so there's a whole framework there that we're missing. I just think that we need to really, really make some drastic changes to make this take us to that next level.
Yeah, we need policy change. And of course, the Senate did come up with a comprehensive attempt at immigration reform, which was shot down in the House of Representatives. That's horrible. And I think every single person who listens to our podcast should be out there asking, what was that legislation and why was it shot down? And then once you ask those two questions, you're going to say, I need to get a hold of my congressman and say, why did you not make sure this passed? Because it would have gone a long way towards helping us reform the asylum process, help us reform how we bring people into the country, helping us reform how we hand out work permits so that we could control the number who come in. And as they come in, put them into a situation where they can work, get some money, have a place to live. So we're not, dealing with a bunch of people that want to work who can't work, who are deprived of work. We need this sort of reform. We've needed it for a long time. People said it would never happen. We got a bipartisan bill through the Senate. The fact that it didn't make it into the House is deplorable. And the Speaker of the House, in my opinion, should be just blown up because I don't mean that physically. I mean blown up in a metaphorical context, blown out of his job, taken out of his job.
Exactly
what I'm talking about. He should be removed from the kind of work he's been doing because he did such a poor job. This is important to our country. Again, we would be in a major recession right now were it not for the immigrants. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that they added $7 trillion to our economy between the year 2020 and as we go towards ending the decade. $7 trillion strictly related to immigrants entering the country. So when you have somebody like a Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, I believe, and Lindsey Graham says, "Oh, this one person could tip the balance of an election." That, again, I'm shocked by that kind of a statement. Obviously, nobody wants an untimely demise, but at the same time, they've got to have policy, and thinking that immigrants are the cause of our crime rate is just completely ridiculous, right, Matty?
It is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he mentioned that the crime rates from the quote unquote illegal aliens, as he called them, is so much smaller. And I did some research; it's about 30% lower than the common U.S. born criminal. There's 30% less. And so why? Because they don't want to get caught, right? They don't want to commit something, get caught and get deported. They want to be here. They want to work. And of the crimes that they do commit, I mean, they're human beings. They're typically petty theft. They're trying to steal food to eat, which I'm condoning it. It's illegal, but at the same time, there's something to be said about the classification of the murder or of the crime. And these singular events, like the one you just talked about earlier, to kick off this podcast, are very, very small in numbers, but people use those to catalyze and to really draw a crowd of, build that wall. Yeah. Hey, my roots are Republican. I'm a conservative at heart, and I've moved to the libertarian framework because it doesn't make sense. And, I try to look at things of what's the best situation for our country. And right now, this is in the crosshairs of what needs to be dealt with.
I mean, it is demagoguery to say that the immigrants are all rapists and murderers and ne'er-do-wells. That's pure demagoguery, and it's purely trying to find a scapegoat and a boogeyman and somebody to point a finger at and just be angry. And so anytime we pick a group of people, they could be a religious group, they could be a nationality, they could be a skin color, this tendency to try to say, to take a brush and say everybody of a group is bad is wrong. It's just simply wrong. And when you try to point that at immigration, it's wrong as well. And all immigrants, again, I want to bring up, we have immigrants from India, from China, across Asia. We have people coming across the southern border. They're not Mexican. They're more from Honduras than any other country. But Honduras, Venezuela, those countries come out at the top, some from Colombia, but Mexicans as well. But Americans tend to sit back and say, there's a southern border, there's a bunch of Mexicans coming across the border. That's not even accurate, right? Yeah. They're statistically way off on just everybody that speaks Spanish is not from Mexico, right? Wake up, folks. Realize that this is a diverse population, a very diverse population. So this one struck me. This came up, the Texas Department of Public Safety, Texas, okay, where the big southern border is and where the governor's really riled up, right? They said that native-born people are twice as likely to commit a crime as an immigrant.
Done.
Native-born Americans twice as likely to end up committing a crime as an immigrant. This is from the state of Texas Department of Public Safety. So it just, if we look at it from the standpoint of economic research, the National Bureau of Economic Research said that migrants have far fewer examples of going into prison than anybody who's a native-born American. That's the National Bureau of Economic Statistics. I couldn't get to the number today. I ran out of time, but they clearly stated that there were far fewer immigrants being penalized and committing crimes. So it's just a false statement. It's a false narrative.
It is a false narrative. And I think what we need to do here, maybe for the balance of the podcast, is, if we can talk about how a business owner, a leader, they can talk to their congressperson and all that, and they can go down that route. But how can they actually go beyond, dealing with these issues to take this innovation that they have to the market? And, we talk a lot about trends. That's something that's holding them back. But what are some ideas, Adam, that we can throw out there for our listeners and viewers so that they can actually take some tangible tools to apply to their business to actually, kind of work through, kind of barrel through this immigration issue and still get things done?
Well, I want to talk one which is language bias. I'm a end of the boomer generation, and I can say that my father, a World War II type person, okay, he was a believer that everybody in the country should speak English. And when I was in school and I was taking classes and I had options to take what I would do, he was never a fan that I should ever take Spanish, and I never did, right? Which was offered in school, and I just simply didn't take it. And the reason was he thought everybody should speak English. Now, he was born in America to immigrants from Germany. He spoke English his whole life. He never learned German, and so he thought that was cool. But that's the basis for what I call language bias. And language bias is where the people that are not speaking English, we tend to say that they're not worthy of having the job, right?
Right.
So we then class everybody. So they could be somebody who speaks with a heavy Indian accent or an Asian accent or speaks Chinese first as a language. They can speak any language other than English. That's the first thing I would say to every employer. When somebody is there and available and they compare that they could have the skills to do the job, I wouldn't say that I let language bias get in the way. There's so many ways to solve that problem now, right? You can use all kinds of tools with your computer, with your mobile phone. There are a lot of ways to get around. Yeah. You don't have to go hire a full-time person to be some sort of a translator.
Right.
And again, once you get a more diverse workforce where you have more people speaking multiple languages, especially if they're speaking 2 or 3, you might have in your workforce some people speaking Spanish, some people speaking Hindi. Then what happens is you have more people that can work with translating the language.
Right.
It's also good for your customer base.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, and I would add to that the fact that leveraging the gig economy in the international stage, using Fiverr, using Upwork.
Yes.
You're going to be doing this stuff with somebody from another country, but you're getting the job done. And again, your job as a business leader or an owner is to grow your company. And if you can't find a capable marketing person locally, then you got to reach out to where the jobs can be done, which is sometimes not in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, even with that, you can use gig workers in the U.S. You don't have to get the Social Security number or check for a work permit of somebody that's doing gig work for you. If you say, I have a task, I want done, spreadsheet analysis, maybe a cleaning job in your factory, maybe somebody that's going to run errands for you or go pick up supplies for you. There's a lot of things that happen inside your organization. If you say, I want to hire somebody to do this task, and you pay them on a task basis, That's the gig economy, and you should try to get paperwork on them so that you properly account for the income taxes. But you're not required to go out and go through the efforts you would go through if you bring someone as an employee. So using more of the gig economy allows you to reach out to these people that you say, look, I can't afford the cost of going through to verify all these work permits, and I don't want to get caught employing somebody who didn't have the right work permit. I don't want to pay the fines. I don't want to go down that route. Well, you say, okay, fine, use them as a gig worker. Then you have to be far less paperwork in order to use their services.
Yeah, and then we've talked about the world of AI, how that can make your current staff more efficient, more effective. There are so many tools out there right now with AI that all you got to do is do a simple search and you'll get a whole boatload. And I think they're, at least for the boomers that are leaving that framework, a lot of it comes down to they don't understand it, they're scared of it. But if they have enough wherewithal to think about bringing somebody on board to help, maybe there's consultants out there, by the way, that all they do is look at your business and see what kind of AI tools would benefit it. Right. I think that's huge as well.
Yeah. So I think what you should be looking at is, and again, it's not just the Southern border. Back just before Christmas, I went to Chicago. I had to go to my son's PhD commencement ceremony, and I stopped for lunch in Itasca, Illinois. Itasca is a town near O'Hare Airport, right? And so I'm looking for a place to grab some lunch. I was looking for a diner. I go into this diner, and literally everyone in there was speaking either Russian or Polish or an Eastern European language, right? Now, fortunately, the menu was in English. There were people who spoke English. They were bilingual, right? But, I could have easily said, people even will do that, take that sort of a background and say, okay, will they work in my workforce? Or would I accept them in my workforce? Then the reality is, why not? Why not? Why would you not say that? And so as I was having lunch there, talked to a few people that were Russian background, and I said, what's it been like since Putin invaded Ukraine? And they said, well, there's been some anti-Russian bias. They go looking for a job, and the employers say, well, can I hire a Russian? Well, what do you mean, can I hire a Russian? If they've got a work permit and they're there and they've got skills, why wouldn't you put them to work, right? You don't let your biases from looking at at their language and then looking at the news and trying to interpret somehow between what you see in the news related to Putin or Russia or the border in Texas, letting that try to make you a decision on it. You don't want to use that to make a decision. Headlines are the worst place to go to make a decision. And at the same time, keep lobbying for these policy changes at the state level and, with your congressman. Yep. This is important. Like, we're just now really starting this immigration issue. The average age of people going to live in America is like 85, 86 years old. There's a lot of boomers out there that are 67 to 74, right? They're going to need a lot of resources to support them. Sure. And a lot of them are going to live to 100. That's the other thing. When we say the average age is like 86, there's millions of people that are going to live into their 90s and to 100. How are we going to support that in our economy? The only way is we got to have more immigration. We've got to keep the country going and growing. We need more people. We've gone through this with the number of births in China, number of births in Japan, and the problem that's created for them. And I always try to remind people of that great story. Germany, you had West Germany, you had East Germany at one point. Whenever the Soviet Union was falling apart, the people we thought of as Germany, which was West Germany, said we will go ahead and accept that there will be one Germany, and everybody who lives in East Germany will be part of the German economy. It sort of doubled their population in one step. Well, of course, the people in East Germany living under Soviet control had far worse economy. The manufacturing plants were out of date, cars were out of date, skill sets were out of date. And the people in West Germany said, that's right, we're going to bring all those people into Germany, we're going to give them the chance to prosper. And it made Germany into the powerhouse of the 80s and 90s that it became, like the leading dominant manufacturer, the leading political government inside of Europe. And they did that because they were willing to double their population in one step. If they could do that and demonstrate to us the strength of how that created a great economy, when we're looking at adding a few thousand people a day to our economy, it's like, hey, that's just beginning to get the drips of what we really need from that. We need a lot more people than that brought into our country. Of course, we need to manage it better, but we need these people. So this is a problem that we need to solve today, because it's going to be crucial as we go forward into the next, through this decade and into the next one.
Very well said, Adam. Very well said. There's lots of things to ponder here for business owners and executives, and these are conversations that you should be having with your staff at all times. Bias is huge. Using the tools available out there, and we ask, if you've got questions you want to talk specifically on how we can help you, reach out to us, Manny@sparkpartners.com, Adam@sparkpartners.com. Next week, we have a really good show with a friend of Adam's who is also a bit of the trendcaster and wrote a book. So excited to hear about that. And with that, Adam, we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, Manny.
Cheers.